Welcome back to the channel, folks. Guess what? Got another tent. Before I start, I should say I didn't buy this one. I'm not sponsored by them. It's been given to me by my mate Sean to have a look at. Let's put it on the scales. And it's, let's have a look, 2.5 kilos as you can see. So the tent in question is a Lightwave, you can see that? A Lightwave T20 Trail 2-person 4-season mountain tent. So it features DAC NSL Featherlight poles. I'll check the diameter of that and put it on screen, I'm not sure. But they look fairly chunky actually. A wee bit heavier than my Zenon UL2 from Force 10. Right, anyway, let's get it outside, we'll get it pitched and I'll show you around. If you note the size of it, it's actually quite bulky when you look at it here, but you can compress it down if you take the poles out, and the bag is quite generous, so it should go in and out when it's wet quite easily. So it features DAC NSL Featherlight poles, which went up really quickly. I've spared you the whole time just putting the thing up. So simple. 2 poles, one slightly longer, one at the front, one slightly shorter, one at the back, and a minimum 4 pegs just to get the thing up and you're done. So one of the things I love about that is that tunnel is just so easy to put up. But it's worth mentioning the poles were not apparently colour coded, I don't think. It says it's green at the back, but it has yellow tabs. It is admittedly a grey pole at the front and a kind of silver tab, so I guess as long as you get that one right, you can't really go wrong. But you'd have to be pretty daft to get it wrong in the first place. Beading nicely, pretty heavy duty fly sheet, you pay for it in the weight. Lots of guy points on it. As you can see, double guide at the front on this pole and a single running off the back pole, which is slightly lower, plus an extra guy line coming off the rear, which gives you a lot more into the wind support. And then it has this kind of more durable finish on the tail. For whatever reason, I'm not actually quite sure, it's a bit like Fjallraven where they do different thicknesses of fabric around the bottom, but on the Lightwave it's only on the rear on the tail for some reason. Not actually quite sure why that is, but again, build quality very good. So a thank you to Sean Stephen for lending me his tent. I'd actually just seen it when I was out with him camping and I thought it's a really nice tent, so he's kindly lent this just so as I can show you around. So that's 2 normal size Thermarest Neo Airs in there, not the wide mats, just the standard. But that's actually pretty generous, I would say. That's quite a nice inner. So the reason it seems very comfortable inside is it appears to be 1 metre 30, 130 centimetres wide at the front. And it kind of keeps most of that to the rear quarter before it narrows slightly towards the foot of the mats. But that's pretty generous, and as you can see, mats together, you've got room on either side. So I like that. That's easily doable for 2 people, and with a big vestibule, a nice comfortable base that you wouldn't feel too claustrophobic or stir crazy spending a lot of time in. At the front, I'm sitting on the mats themselves. I'm 5'8", and I've actually got probably about a hand depth above me here, so cooking would not be an issue. Let me just try at the back for you. Yes, I'm stooping a wee bit and I'm sitting on the ground. Yeah, so not quite as high, but it's still relatively livable. The inner's a wee bit saggy, but it's often the case with an inner that hangs from a structure outside. It's not always absolutely tight. You can see the 2 small prop vents at either side of the vestibule here. Now if you were to ask Carol McDermott, who owns the company, why the vents in this tent are so small, he'll go into great technical detail about the Venturi effect, I think it's called, and why these work very effectively. In practice, actually, I've found they have actually on other Lightwave models. If you look at the depth of the vestibule itself in terms of storing packs and cooking, you could easily put your packs away towards the narrow end there and cook down here by the inner. It looks over 1 metre long. So there is tons of space for storing gear for 2. And on this one, the door pins back the same way as my other crux that I had, but it's a far wider door opening, so it's less likely to impede on your head. It's also a two-way zip at the top, so you can open it up here and then drop down the zip from this end if you're cooking, or for additional ventilation. And there's, as you can see, a hood over there to protect you from any direct rain, so that's pretty smart. One of the other things I like is it has almost full length pockets right along the inner, which, although they'll not take a lot of weight without sagging, it's still much more useful than some of the tents that have virtually no pockets in them, so I do like that. There is a hanging loop for a torch or to hang a drying line, but it doesn't appear to have the drying line already included, so you'd probably want to add that. So it's a pretty warm tent, obviously designed for 4-season use. That's again is quite a small vent on the inner, so not an awful lot of mesh to worry about in terms of breeze, and that matches up with the vent at the back, which can be closed and velcroed down. And then at the foot of the tent, I don't know how clearly you can see this, there's a thin area of breathable midgie mesh running around the rear quarter, just to give a wee bit of extra airflow, I guess, top and bottom. Let me just close up this inner door, which ties back on the left here. I don't know if you can see it in the frame. I think the camera's too close. Elasticated though, which is fine. Single zip and just a top mesh vent. And then you can just roll this off to the left. This one just secures to the side. So my head's at the door and my feet have tons of room without touching any of the inner. So easily a good tent for 6 foot. 6 foot plus. I think you wouldn't have any problem with your bag touching the inner and then touching the fly sheet and transferring condensation. You can pitch it inner only and it attaches to the poles, and then these are used to secure the tent, the inner tent, to the ground like a pegging point. You can detach this inner and leave just the outer up, or you can see the hooks that are designed to go straight onto the poles. If you're hanging the inner only in a hot country, you can do the same. Yeah, so there's velcro here to go around the poles as well if you're only hanging the inner again, but not something I'm likely to do in UK. And it's got double toggle tie backs on the door, so it ties back at 2 points to make sure they'll not get in your road when cooking. Fly comes really close to the ground, so again keeps snow out, keeps wind and rain out and cold. There's my shoes up in the corner there. I don't know if this gives the impression, but it's absolutely huge. You could just about sleep another person in there, or you could actually easily sleep your dog. So it's a real workman-like, well-built, what I'd call a genuine mountain tent. It's got a real sturdy feel about it. You pay for that in the weight at 2.5 kilos, but then you'd carry 2.5 kilos for a Hilleberg Solo, and you'd only have room for you and just enough room to cook. This thing is massive in comparison. These cords here are about the same thickness as the guy lines, almost like mini ropes. So again, kind of comparable with Hilleberg in terms of thickness and durability. The fly sheet itself, I'll put the denier up on the screen, but it looks like it is sil nylon, so it doesn't appear to be taped on the inside. So this might have a few leaks that you would have to treat with Silnet on the outside. It's been raining fairly heavily overnight, but I don't see any leaks in here. One slight niggle, because this is such a long vestibule, when you've got to stretch out to get to the zip at this end and then lift it back up, you've got a long wet stretch to get out there. So there you have it, the Lightwave T20. A tent well worth a look if you can still get it. I think there's a bit of a problem with stock now. I'm not sure if it's discontinued or whether it's just subject to the general stock problems coming from China. However, it's a great mountain tent. It really is pretty butch, pretty heavy, solid. 2.5 kilos, you'd have to think about that if you were going solo. That's fine, split between two, and it has plenty of generous room for two. I'm comparing it with a couple of tents that come to mind. Hilleberg Nallo, which is very similar to this. This is a great Nallo alternative at a lot less price, but still very, very well built. So I think it's well worth a look if you're considering the Hilleberg. The other one actually which I had was the Force 10 Zenon UL2. This is like a heavy duty version of that. The great thing about the Zenon was it's actually under 2 kilos, 1.8ish, which is fantastic in terms of carrying it yourself. However, I would say the Zenon would not take the kind of heavy weather this would take, because the poles on it are thinner. Both this and the Force 10 Zenon UL2 feature a Gothic arch pole, which I think gives a bit more additional stability due to the tight corner at the top. rather than it being just one arch, which is more easy to wobble and wobble back and forward. These give you slightly more strength from side to side. So yeah, I really like it. I think it's a great value tent at that cost. It's very, very heavily built, which is great. And if you're in the market for something less expensive than the Hilleberg Nallo, or maybe want something just a bit more robust than the Zenon UL2, this is definitely the kind of middle ground and well worth looking at. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope that was useful just to show you around it. There's not an awful lot of material around on the internet, on Lightwave generally, and on the T20. But I'm quite impressed with it. I have to say, I'd feel pretty comfortable using this in most conditions all year round. Well worth a look if you don't mind that weight. So thanks, and I'll see you out there for the next one. Cheers just now.